I was about to sign my enlistment order when the phone rang. "Stop embarrassing the family, you useless thing." It was my brother. I let the screen go dark and felt my pulse settle, a slow drum in my wrist. The recruiting station smelled like toner and disinfectant. The fluorescent tubes hummed, turning everything the color of old milk. The clerk slid me another form and a government pen. I wrote my name once, twice, the letters steady as if my hand had trained for this moment and my head was just catching up. The second the signature dried, I pictured the glassy shine of our dining table back home and my brother tapping his spoon like a gavel. In that house, verdicts arrived with a smile. Breakfast had been a performance, my father reading headlines aloud, my mother hovering with a napkin, Ethan standing in the doorway holding an embossed invitation like it was a medal. "Keynote on strategic stability," he'd said, letting the syllables sparkle. When I told them I was enlisting as a combat medic, he didn't argue. He just tilted his head, weighed me like an object on a scale, and dropped that one word that stuck to my ribs all morning. My father folded a crisp 100 into my palm on the way out. "If it gets hard, come home." And my mother kissed the air beside my cheek. I slipped the bill between a photo of my grandfather in uniform and the cardboard back of a cheap frame. The photo always sat on the entry table like a stop sign. I looked at his squint once, then closed the frame and left. Sometimes family shows up later. Sometimes they don't. The officer at the station murmured as he checked my paperwork. I met his eyes just long enough to let him know I'd heard. I wasn't here to wait on anyone's arrival. I was here so the waiting would stop. Burlington's sky was a wet wool blanket when I stepped outside. Coffee smell leaked from the corner cafe. The sidewalk shone like a sheet of slate. I walked past the bakery where the owner asked college questions she already knew the answers to and turned toward the bus. The glass gave me back a thin reflection, jaw set, hair tied, shoulders square enough to carry a pack. The bus exhaled and took me away from the table where my brother practiced being important. Fort Ironwood met me with mud and cadence. The gate clanked shut, and some thin thread inside me did the same. We shouldered duffels in a line while rain threaded needles through our collars. A staff sergeant with stubble like iron filings moved down the row, scanning, memorizing. "Wallace?" he said when he reached me. "Staff Sergeant Morales." He didn't ask why I was here. He looked at my hands. "Keep them steady." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, more like a notch being carved. They took us to a room washed in red light where plastic torsos lay on gurneys, their vinyl skin gleaming wet. A timer blinked in the corner. Tourniquets, gauze, chest seals, IV catheters, everything neat as an altar. The rain on the roof drum-rolled our names. "Go," someone barked, and the room came alive with fumbling, swearing, fabric ripping. I stepped into the noise and let my hands do what they'd studied on screens and in pamphlets. Loop, twist, tuck, press, until the artificial pulse under my fingers turned from frantic to firm. A simulated blast cracked the speakers. My shoulder flinched, but my grip didn't. Breath in, breath out, count 3. When the timer cut, the room felt suddenly too large. Morales leaned over my station, touched the edge of my bandage, and gave one short nod. "Calm under pressure." The words were small enough to pocket and heavy enough to anchor the day. Outside, the rain thinned to a silver mist. We carried sandbags until our arms went numb, then jogged to the range where the air smelled like wet rubber and oil. A woman with a high, practical ponytail fell into step beside me, slipped a square of candy into my palm without breaking stride. "Sugar. For your head," she said, eyes forward. "Park." I kept the candy on my tongue until it dissolved into a clean, bright line. Names didn't need to stick yet. Movements did. After chow, we filed into a cinder block room for the blind field kit test. They handed each of us an elastic band and killed the lights. The world narrowed to touch and breath. On the table, the kit lay scattered. Scissors, rounded tip, cool and blunt. Tape, gritty edge. Catheter, slick ridge 2 inches from the hub. Gloves, powder ghosting my fingertips. I mapped the puzzle by texture. Left hand pinned, right hand sorted, the pattern returning to itself like a song you don't realize you know until you're humming. Across the room, someone knocked a tray to the floor and cursed. The timer stuttered, then surged. I found the last roll, by the way. Its cardboard core clicked against the plastic tray and sealed the kit shut. "Time," Morales called. The lights came back in a hard white slap. Steam lifted from shoulders, breath fogged. A guy 2 stations down snorted, not unkind, but not kind either. "Aspirin girl," he said, like it was a nickname that would keep us safe. I turned just enough to let my voice carry and not enough to start a conversation. "Call me Doc when someone bleeds." The sentence felt like sliding a bolt into place. By the time the sun gave up and the sky turned the color of cold tin, we were hosing the mud off our boots and wringing water from our socks over a ditch that would never be dry. I sat on the lower bunk, the metal frame pressing a straight line between my shoulder blades, and wiped the grime from my dog tag with the corner of a towel. In the pocket of my pack, the frame with my grandfather's picture clicked against the spine of my notebook. He wasn't smiling in the photo. The sun made him squint. I pressed my thumb to the glass anyway, and felt the chill through the cheap pain. "Real honor doesn't need polish," he seemed to say. "It needs hands that don't shake." The bay quieted by inches. Boots lined up under bunks like dark, obedient dogs. Someone's radio whispered static beneath a pillow. I stretched my fingers until the knuckles popped and lay back, counting breaths, letting the day settle into a sequence I could replay without sound. The first signature, the rain, the red light, the nod. I thought of my father's envelope and how crisp money can feel like a leash. I thought of my mother's kiss on the air beside my face. I thought of Ethan's spoon tapping porcelain, the way you test whether a glass has any cracks. The night thinned. A drop fell from the rafters, then another. The rain gave up all at once. Silence held for the length of a slow inhale. Then the alarm hit. Metal on metal, a hard, bright clang that ran on rails straight through the barracks and into my bones. Lights snapped awake. Voices collided in the aisle. My feet were on the floor before my head could tell them why. Morales appeared in the doorway, silhouette cut from a darker shade of the dark. "Wallace," he said, and the room's chatter hiccuped. My name sounded different here. Less like a comparison and more like a unit of measure. I grabbed my pack, zipped it, felt the weight settle familiar against my spine. Park shoved past and bumped my shoulder with hers. It felt like someone tapping a nail into wood. Fast, certain, necessary. Orders came clipped and clean, a new rhythm to memorize. I tightened my laces and stood in the bright rectangle of the hall with the others, faces bleached by fluorescent glare, breath turning the air damp. In my pocket, the frame edge bit my palm. In my head, the dining table flashed and disappeared, as useless now as the word my brother loved. Night alarm. I'm sent to Camp Ashfall early due to lack of field medics. The third day at Ashfall, the humanitarian convoy caught fire 800 meters away. I counted 4 breaths and then ran into the fire. Heat hit like a fist before the sound finished unrolling across the flats. Sand lifted in sheets, a hot, gritty curtain that found your teeth and stayed. The trucks were skeletal in an instant, frames glowing dull orange, canvas hissing back into air. I kept my eyes on the black shapes inside, not on the flames, and moved the way we were taught. Low, deliberate, hands first. Park's boots carved arcs beside me. She shouldered into a firing stance and stitched warning bursts over the ridge where glass flashed. 2 o'clock, maybe 3, she said, voice flat through grit. I nodded, knelt, and pressed palm to a rib cage under soot. There, shallow, fast, frantic. I peeled back melted cloth, wiped until the skin shone wet, then slapped a chest seal and smoothed the edges hard with the flat of my wrist. Breath steadied to a ragged metronome. I threaded an IV into a vein that rolled like a live wire and taped it down while the world hissed. Another body coughed, more ash than air. Park pivoted, covered my back with the calm of someone who has made peace with physics. We moved in a loop. Drag, seal, lift, hand off, repeat. Somewhere behind the blaze, a child was screaming in a language pain translates perfectly. By the time Morales waved us out with his whole arm, the metal had cooled from orange to angry black. The air smelled like oil and meat and something electrical that had tried not to die but did. I counted heads without letting the numbers turn into names. 2 conscious, 1 barely, 1 fighting the mask. My throat tasted like a coin. I reset the seal on the worst chest, squeezed fluids, and forced my hands not to tremble. When the last stretcher clacked into the transport, the adrenaline fell off a cliff and left my legs heavy. I stood anyway. Back at camp, the heat didn't let up. It just changed costume. Inside the TOC, it dressed as humming electronics and stale coffee. Green glow washed everyone to the same shade. Maps bloomed on screens, corridors traced in bright lines like promises. Major Rourke leaned on his knuckles over the central display, jaw set a few millimeters too tight. "We briefed a clean route," he said, not looking up. "Who scrubbed this?" Specialist Keene stepped forward from the console bank, 19 and trying to be older, headset cord wrapped twice around his fingers. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. "Sir, the corridor was marked clear on the overlay at 0900. The convoy rolled at 0850. Rourke's palm cut the air. "Don't tell me clocks. Tell me why civilians were driving through a blast garden." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried like metal. Heads bent back to screens. Keene's mouth tightened. "Sir, my console shows the update timestamp as your console shows what someone wants it to show." Another staffer snapped without turning. The accusation landed with the dull thud of something thrown too often. Keene swallowed hard and went quiet. The room absorbed his silence like it was insulation. I stared at the map. On the corner of the overlay where the legend lived, a tiny alphanumeric stamp winked on and off in the refresh cycle. Not a label, not a note, more like a tag someone forgot to hide. It flickered and was gone. I leaned in until the edge pixelated, waited for the refresh, and caught it again. 2 letters, a slash, a string. Not familiar, but the structure said department, not operator. My skin prickled the way it does when you realize you're looking at a scene that played earlier but with fingerprints. We handed off the last casualty to the clinic and met in the shade of a rattling AC unit that didn't cool anything except morale. Park slid a dented water bottle toward me and wiped a black streak from her forearm with the back of her glove. "You saw it too," she said. "The stamp," I answered. "Bottom right, flashing with the refresh. That corridor wasn't marked clean when the convoy left." "Someone polished it after the fact," Park said, letting the words sit there between us where the hum could chew them. "Come on, you need to see the logs." She crowded me into a narrow workstation along the wall, fingers quick on a keyboard that had lost half its letters to sand and rage. "Most folks stop at the overlay," she said, "but everything leaves crumbs." She pulled up an audit panel I hadn't been cleared to use, then looked at me like a teacher deciding whether to hand a student a sharper knife. "Don't repeat the keystrokes. Just look." The grid populated. User IDs, timestamps, access endpoints, hashes that proved a thing had been a thing before someone touched it again. The corridor's status change carried a timestamp that sat 20 minutes to the right of the convoy's departure. The convoy rolled. Then the corridor turned green. My mouth dried out in a place water couldn't find. "That's reversed," I said. "That's not a mistake, that's—" "Pick a word you can defend in a room with lawyers," Park said. Her tone wasn't cynical, it was careful. Outside, a generator coughed and caught. Inside, Keene hovered 2 workstations down, shoulders up around his ears. Someone had given him the job of rewriting a report sentence so it wouldn't sound like blame. He was leaving a trail of eraser crumbs. We brought the screen to Morales. He stood with his arms folded like a barricade, eyes going smaller as the numbers lined up wrong. He didn't speak for a long 10 seconds. The AC thumped and went still. The room inflated with heat. Keene glanced over, hope flickering, then dimming when he judged the faces. "Sergeant," I said. Someone changed the label after the convoy went wheels up. He blew a breath through his nose, the kind that buys you exactly 1 second. "Hold it," he said. "No assumptions on paper. Let me talk to Rourke." The look he gave me carried 2 orders at once: good work and shut up. Afternoon slid into a red, tired dusk. The clinic's fans chopped the air into rectangles. I checked the chest seal I'd placed earlier. The edge had started to lift in the sweat and heat, so I pressed it back down and talked into the patient's eyes until his breathing synced with mine. You learn to give your pulse away for a minute and take it back later when no one's looking. In the corner, a little boy sat on a plastic chair with a blanket over his knees, staring at his soot-blackened fingers like they belonged to someone else. Park left him a bottle of water and a packet of sugar. The sugar dissolves faster than fear. Evening brief was short and sharp. Rourke's knuckles were white along the table's edge. He didn't raise his voice. "We're reviewing the route architecture. No chatter outside this room. Keene, fix comms latency. Morales, take your medic and your shooter and sleep in shifts." The last order carried more gentleness than anything else he said. It made the hair on my arms rise. We ate out of pouches as the sky bled into night. Sand got everywhere, a second skin no one asked for. I rinsed my hands with 2 capfuls of water and felt the day settle into my tendons. Lift, drag, tape, press. Park sat on an ammo crate and pulled up her hoodie against a wind that didn't cool so much as move the heat around. "You good?" she asked. "Define good," I said. She smirked. "Not about your soul. About the logs. You saw enough to know it's not on Keene." "It isn't," I said, "but he'll carry it if we let him." "He will," she agreed. "And whoever polished that corridor will let him." She tossed me a protein bar like a slow pitch. "Eat. Then I'll show you the backup cron. If someone tried to clean their prints, the mirror might still have the first smudge." After lights out, we slid past sleeping bodies and humming machines and ducked into the narrow space behind a comms rack where the air smelled like warm copper. Park tapped a command string that felt like trespass even to watch. Lines of text poured down like rain against green glass. She filtered for the corridor object, then for the right event that flipped its status. There it was. A delta time that landed after departure, a user group that didn't belong to this room, and a hash that resolved to a signature I couldn't interpret yet. My scalp prickled as if someone had run a comb of static over it. The math of it was simple. The past hadn't changed, but the label on it had. I printed nothing, saved nothing. I copied the shape of the thing into memory the way you memorize a face, angles, shadows, the scar above the lip. Park nudged me with her shoulder. "Tomorrow we show Morales the mirror itself. Tonight we shut up and breathe." I wanted to ask why she was helping me push a rock that could roll back on our feet. She didn't owe me a reason, and I didn't ask. Her patience was a kind of loyalty I understood. Not to me, not to rank, but to the truth of the numbers and the bodies the numbers should protect. On my cot I tried to sleep and failed. The day replayed in silent loops, the chest rising under my palm, the stamp flickering at the screen's edge. Keene's jaw clenching at a reprimand he hadn't earned. I thought of my grandfather's photo in my pack, the way the cheap frame bit my palm like a reminder to return what I took with me in the morning. I would. I had to. Sometime after midnight, the base stilled. A moth beat itself against the plastic cover of a light until it quit. Generators shifted from growl to purr. I checked my phone for the time and saw a notification I didn't want, but couldn't help opening. A photo filled the screen. My brother in a glass lobby, lanyard around his neck, badge clipped at a sharp angle, smile calibrated to look humble and didn't. The caption was short enough to fit in the space where a sigh goes. Ethan posted a photo of the clearance badge, moving up. The department name matched the number stamp on the overlay. Flashback. E.Wallace at DSB is the last access to the routing overlay. I only know one E.Wallace. The TOC was dim enough to make the screens feel like weather. Green bled over the consoles, painting everyone the same sickly hue. Morales stood behind me, arms crossed so tight his sleeves creased into knives. He tapped the table once with a knuckle and the mirror log populated. Routine backup. The kind that runs when no one remembers it exists. Audit entries march down in clean rows. Object IDs, verbs, timestamps that refused to blink. And there, fixed in the line like a seed in a tooth, E.Wallace at DSB. The cursor hovered as if it could sweat. I felt sweat prick at the nape of my neck, the generators thrumming under the floor like a second pulse. There are lots of Wallaces, I told myself. There are lots of E's. But I had a picture in my pocket of a boy who grew into a man, who practiced victory in the reflection of our dining room window. My mouth tasted of ash and old coffee. Routine backup means it wrote before anyone decided to clean, Morales said quietly. No edits to the mirror unless someone is either sloppy or stupid. I don't think they're stupid, I said. I think they thought the overlay was enough. His jaw flexed. We don't know who they is yet, and until we do, this doesn't leave the loop. He cut the screen, and the room seemed to lurch in the sudden dark like a boat. Rourke, he said, now. We found the major in the corner room that pretended to be an office by having a door. The antiseptic smell from the medical tent bled in through the vents. A clean bite under the stink of sand and hot wiring. Rourke stood, one hand braced on the map table, the other worrying the edge of a folder. Morales closed the door with the care you use on a loaded thing and briefed with the fewest words that wouldn't get us killed by omission. Rourke listened without blinking. He didn't look at me until the end. You're sure of what you saw, he said. I'm sure of the order of time, I answered. Departure first. Corridor clean after. The mirror shows access by a DSB account. The user string matches my brother's initial and last name. Something passed over his face. A shadow of arithmetic. You understand the implications. If this is an error, we pin a career to the mat. If it's not, we kick a door that brings cameras. I'm not asking for cameras, I said. I'm asking to keep anyone else from driving through fire because a line turned green to satisfy a narrative. He stared at the door as if he could see through it. The generator outside coughed, recovered, settled back into its yawn. We take a breath, he said. We keep the sample chain clean. We don't make accusations in writing. Morales, lock the mirror. Wallace, you were calm under pressure in a tent. Be calm under pressure in a system. Sir, I said, because there was nothing else to call him, and nothing else to call what was happening. We left with an understanding and no air. Outside, the day had already burned down into evening. The medical tent lamped the yard in honest white. I checked on the chest I'd sealed. The patient slept in the crooked way pain allows. The antiseptic bit the back of my nose. I welcomed it. Clean is a kind of hope. Park slid in beside me like she'd always been there. Meeting? She asked. Closed, I said. We keep the mirror cold. We don't put names in print. Good, she said. But we can still collect the pieces, yes? She jerked her chin toward the comms bay. Before the tide comes in. We ducked behind a rack that hummed like bees trapped in a jar. She didn't need me to tell her what I'd seen. She knew by the way my shoulders had moved all afternoon. We need IP and device, she said, fingers already summoning the terminal window. IDS can be borrowed. Machines tell the truth unless bribed. She scraped the logs with a surgeon's economy. The backup hash matched the overlay object. The right event pointed to a device group we didn't recognize. "That's not us," she said. "That's not anyone in this room or the next one over." She filtered again, isolating the last external session that touched the corridor object. A string of numbers resolved into a familiar silhouette on a little embedded map in the corner of the admin tool. "What am I looking at?" I asked, though I knew. "Geotag on the last session's origination," Park said. "Somebody left location on when they accessed through the liaison gateway." Her mouth tightened. "Arlington." "What?" The word tasted like glass. Arlington meant office towers with frosted glass lobbies and badges on retractable reels. Arlington meant the satellite building whose lobby I'd seen this morning, reflected on my phone, where my brother had posted his smile under an atrium skylight with a caption that pretended not to gloat. I swallowed something that wanted to become a sound. "Same complex," I said. "Same day." She looked at me sideways. "You need me to say it first?" "No," I said. "I need to make sure that when we say it, it sticks." "Then we call the grown-ups," Park said, softer than her words, "on a line that isn't a sieve." By then, the camp lay down into night. Generators thrummed low, a metal lullaby. The sky turned to velvet, and sand cooled just enough to remember what shade felt like. Morales gave us a look that asked and answered in one pass, then keyed me into a back room where the air didn't move. He handed me a headset, then stood by the door like a statue that could draw and shoot. The encrypted line chirped once, then clicked. "Agent Noel Tran," a woman said, not wasting syllables. I laid out what we had, the reversed timestamps, the audit trail, the mirror log with an unedited entry, the backup hash we could match on request, the access through a DSB liaison gateway, and a geotag that didn't belong to our hemisphere. I didn't say my brother's name. I didn't need to. "Freeze the mirror," she said. "No further writes. No screenshots on uncontrolled devices. Photograph only through a locked camera to evidence vault. I'll open a case number and transmit a temporary chain of custody protocol." "Understood," I said. "I'll also need source IP and device identifier," she continued. "If the session came through a gateway, I want the upstream logs. If anyone here knows how to speak to that gateway like a friend, get them in a chair. Park can pull what's local," I said. "For the rest, you'll need someone with the keys back home." "I have some keys," Tran said.
I believed her.
"Listen to me, Sergeant Wallace. If what you're telling me bears out, you will be placed between family and process. Do not try to hold both in your hands at once." "I know which one bleeds," I said. She was quiet for a heartbeat that sounded like a stamp going down on paper. "I'll ping you when the freeze order is live. You'll feel the system shiver." We signed off. Morales didn't ask to debrief feelings. "Eat," he said, "then sleep. The machine will wake us when it wants more." I stepped outside and let the night touch my skin. The generator's hum pressed against me like a large animal, heavy, alive. Somewhere beyond the fence line, dogs barked and then changed their minds. I took my rations to the edge of the light and chewed until the food remembered how to be food. Park found me with the faintest of grins. "Got your IP," she said, waving a scrap of paper like an old-fashioned magic trick. "Gateway logs say the last successful write hit from a device registered to the Arlington complex. There's a tag for a floor I've seen on LinkedIn posts. DSB liaison." "Level?" I asked. She tapped the paper. 6. The number meant access, not intelligence. It meant doors that opened when you thought about them. I pictured Ethan in his lobby again, adjusting a lanyard, practicing gravity. The heat rose under my skin in a way no wind would move. "Take the victory later," Park said, reading what my face gave away. "Right now we take the next step." The next step came as a vibration through the floor more than a sound. Systems hiccuped, screens flashed, freeze order received. Tran had reached in from wherever she sat and placed a glass lid over our little dish. Morales exhaled, a sound like a safe door closing. I went to the medical tent because bodies make more sense than networks when the numbers start to talk back. The antiseptic bit, the cots creaked. The sleeping man's chest rose and fell under the seal I'd pressed down twice. I counted my breaths with his. Sometimes breathing together is the only honest promise. When the summons hit, it hit clean. Orders printed from a machine that smelled like hot plastic, edges still warm when Morales handed them over. Forward sight Echo Foxtrot, mountain terrain, minimal communications. I traced the letters with my eyes until they blurred into direction. Movement is mercy. It keeps you from gnawing the same thought to bone. I stuffed my kit, checked my med bag like it was liturgy. Tourniquets, chest seals, IVs, gauze. Morphine I hoped not to need and would need anyway. On my bunk, I balanced the frame with my grandfather's photo atop the pack for a second, then slid it inside face down. I didn't kiss it. I didn't pray. I folded my hands to keep them from calling anyone. My phone buzzed once against the metal slat and lit my face the way secrets do.
The message had no name attached, just a number I knew well enough to recognize when it hid. "Don't dig too deep, Riley. Family needs peace." I read it twice, then let the screen go black so it could show me nothing. Outside, rotors beat the night into pieces that would fit in a map. I shouldered my pack and stepped into the wash. The text burned after image into my sight and then, finally, burned out. Rocks fly into my mask as the second explosion echoes from the mouth of the crevasse. Locke wrings his knees. "My thigh is punctured!" I insert the clamp and count down 90 seconds to keep his pulse. Slate skitters under my elbows, wet as glass. The air smells like cordite and wet stone, with a thread of hot oil that shouldn't be on a mountainside. Locke's thigh is a mouth trying to speak with too much blood. I dig by feel, not sight. 2 fingers slide, find the arterial spurt. The clamp bites. 90, I say, and my voice sounds like it belongs to the radio. Park drops into a knee beside me, shoulder to shoulder, rifle shouldered, short, disciplined bursts that hold the world at arm's length. Morales pops a smoke can farther downslope. Wind drags the white curtain sideways, a cheap wall that is good enough for now. 70. I press, count, breathe for him. Locke's teeth are knocking with the shock more than the cold. I pinch a line, tape it, and feel the tremor smooth under my palm. Slate dust grits between glove and skin. 50. Behind us, Vance coughs a barbed sound and buckles. I shove the clamp handle hard into Locke's thigh for Park to hold and crawl the 2 meters that feel like 10. Vance's chest rises high, stalls, then falls in a hiss. "Needle," I say, and it's already in my hand. Muscle memory is faster than words. I find the notch, punch, feel the pop and the breath returning, thin but obedient. Decompressed. I say it for me as much as for the radio. Rourke is on the net, voice tight enough to cut. Echo Foxtrot element, status. 2 wounded, 1 stabilized femoral, 1 chest decompressed, moving under smoke. Morales answers. He's calm in the way a cliff face is calm. Still, heavy. Not going anywhere until it does. We start to inch. The slope is a slick table balanced wrong. Boots search for purchase. The slate answers with treachery. Park keeps a metronome of fire that makes the far lip think twice. The drizzle finds every gap in my collar and draws a cold finger down my back. 30, I tell Locke, because numbers are a rope you can throw someone when you don't have hands left. He looks at me and tries to laugh. What comes out is a wheeze shaped like a joke. The radio cracks. New traffic barges into our channel, header tone wrong. Routing update. A neutral voice says, "Follow corridor Echo Blue for extraction. Repeat, Echo Blue." The data packet header flashes on Morales' wrist display, a truncated tag that shouldn't be here at all. DSB//liaison. The letters hit my chest like a kick. E.Wallace at DSB, the mirror log had said. Arlington, the geotag had whispered. The mountain doesn't care about offices, but the office has reached up the mountain anyway. Work snaps onto net. Who authorized this change of route? The anger is clean like alcohol. No one answers. The packet sits there in our feed, smug, and official. Smoke thins and a black tooth of rock appears where it shouldn't. Morales makes the call you make when you can't stand still and can't go back. We move Echo Blue until contradicted, he says, because a bad plan you understand beats a good plan you can't hear. We hitch Vance onto a drag, lock on a makeshift stretcher from 2 broken poles and a poncho. The path Echo Blue points to looks like a rumor drawn by a tired finger, narrow, angling along a scree shelf that promises to betray. My boots surf a skin of wet shale. The drizzle decides to become rain, not for drama, but for spite. Eyes up, Park says. Left ridge, 2 shapes. Might be goats, might not. She sends a pair of warning shots that convince curiosity to keep its head down. Minds don't care about curiosity. The first one is scatter size, a pinch of metal under the slate. It pops a warning more than a sentence. The rear team stumbles, and then a second pop answers with punctuation. I taste stone. A man goes down with a sound like air escaping a tire. Keep moving, Morales orders. And it's not cruelty, it's math. I push 2 morphine auto-injectors into Vance's thigh. Not for pain he admits to, but for the pain his face can't translate yet. Stay with me, I tell him. You want to breathe? You owe me another 20 breaths. He counts with me, whispering numbers like a prayer he learned last week. The radio hops frequencies like it's nervous. Static gnaws at the edges of Rourke's next sentence, but the core survives. Bird inbound on low noise. 20 Mike's Morales nods as if the helicopter can see him. Copy. We'll be at Echo Blue marker. He doesn't say, if the mountain allows. We tuck into a kink in a slope while Park scouts 2 body lengths ahead, chin low, rain beating on her lashes. I check Locke's clamp, still biting. His skin is the color of paper, his lips a bad crayon. I slide a blanket under him to steal back a little heat. Vance stares at me as if my face is a horizon he has to keep in frame. Talk, I say. Tell me something true. My dog's name is Hank, he says. That's a terrible name, I say, and his mouth twitches. Keep breathing for Hank. The new route wants us under an overhang where the slate layers peel like old paint. The air smells older here. Damp rock and lichen. A pause in the gunpowder. I flatten a map against my thigh just long enough to catch a symbol stamped in the corner of the packet. The same austere font. The same slash. My brother's world. Sent in neat, clean letters to mine. I hear myself from 2 nights ago in Rourke's office. If you keep quiet, there will be more coffins. The mountain nods, impartial. We move again, now with urgency shaved closer, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Park's hand goes up, open palm, and we freeze. She kneels, brushes rain-darkened slate with the back of her glove, then pivots and points 2 fingers to a safer line hugging an ugly seam. We take that seam like a bargain. The wind carries a new sound. At first, a suggestion, and then the truth. Rotors. The helicopter arrives low, polite to the terrain, blades cutting the drizzle into mist. We flare smoke and wave panels. The pilot takes his time with the air the way a surgeon takes his time with a knife. No sudden gestures. We shove Locke aboard with his clamp still clamped, his laugh a whisper of confusion that he's still allowed to make sounds. Vance next. I climb after him and brace his shoulders while the crew chief straps him down. His chest stutters. His eyes slide toward the corner where the sky is a strip torn in metal. Park slaps my shoulder once and shoves a palm-sized drive into my glove before the crew chief can see it. "Pulled the packet from the encryptor," she shouts into the hurricane. "Signature block wasn't fully stripped." Subkey prefix, Arlington DSB range. Her grin is small and mean. "Your hunch has teeth." The bird lifts and the mountain falls away, all edges and wet shine. I look at the drive in my palm, feel its plastic heat. The reroute sequence is signed, not just any liaison. A subkey in a range we've already memorized like a bad song. The letters E and W are not on the drive, but they might as well be. The headset crackles. Rourke's voice. "Confirm extraction. 2 urgent surgical, 1 priority. Debrief on landing. Morales, get me that header." The crew chief pats my arm to get my attention. He points at Vance's monitor, then at me, then draws a line flat in the air that means don't, as if I would stop. I lean in until my breath fogs my goggles and count with Vance again. 10, 9, 8. He's listening, but not like before. 7. The rotor beat folds the numbers into a single hard sound. 6. We crest the ridge and the wind shears sideways. The bird lurches. The line on the monitor wobbles. 5. I press 2 fingers to his neck. Find the thin drumbeat I've been borrowing all day. 4. It slips. Returns. Argues. The crew chief squeezes my shoulder hard enough to leave a print. 3. Rain hammers the fuselage like knuckles. The drive in my glove feels heavier than it is. Park's eyes meet mine across the noise. She nods once. Not victory. Acknowledgement. 2. Vance's eyes are on me but not seeing me. They're seeing a dog named Hank, or a kitchen light, or a sky not full of knives. 1, I say, because sometimes the only way to keep time honest is to hold it to its word. Vance loses pulse as soon as the rotor hits. I hold the cold dog tag. Back at base, Agent Noel Tran is waiting. "Riley, the subpoena has signed. You fly to D.C. tomorrow morning." Defense attorney smirks. "Are you biased because your brother thought you were useless?" I reply, "I have a chain of evidence." The courtroom eats sound and gives back only what it wants. Cold lights, polished wood, a flag that never blinks. The defense leans on the podium like it belongs to him. I keep my hand still on the rail and let the question die between us. The judge nods once. Answer. I do. Chain of custody, audit log, backup hash, mirror that ran before anyone remembered to tidy the past. Words simple enough to fit on a whiteboard and heavy enough to bend air. Agent Noel Tran goes first on foundation. She speaks like a carpenter measuring twice. The mirrored backup created at scheduled intervals. The hash values that fingerprint each state of the file. The sealed export photographed only by a vault camera that timestamps on entry and exit. She does not raise her voice or her eyebrows. She taps the binder once. The clerk marks an exhibit number. The judge looks satisfied that a ladder has rungs. Major Rourke follows, all edges sanded down for the occasion but none removed. He lays out the calls and times the way he lays out a map. Convoy wheels up at 0850. Corridor marked clean at 0909. Explosion at 0931. Medevac at 1012. He keeps his eyes on his timeline and out of stories. The corridor's state changed after we committed to it, he says. We didn't drive into an error. Someone repainted the sign behind us. The defense tries to tug on loose threads. Could system clocks drift? Tran is ready. Network time protocol, redundancy, variance margins far smaller than the 19 minutes in question. Could the mirror log itself be altered? She answers with the same even breath, not without leaving a second mirror of the alteration and a mismatch in the hash chain. Could a user ID be spoofed? Yes, in a world where you also clone device certificates and walk through a series of secure doors. Here, the upstream gateway logs record a session from a registered device inside a liaison office in Arlington. Her hands never cross each other. Mine unclench under the table and then remember to hold. Keene sits at the end of the government's row like a kid trying to disappear behind a coat rack. When he takes the stand, he keeps his chin up by force. He walks the court through his console, the overlay visible to the room, the latency that sometimes makes a refresh lag, the separate admin panel no one asked him to open the day of the convoy because the overlay said what a briefing needed to say. He admits where he is weak. He is 19 and it is not a crime. Tran slides him the printout that shows his machine writing exactly nothing after 0850. So, the clean marker we saw at 0909, the prosecutor asks, did that come from your desk? Keene's voice cracks once and then steadies. No, ma'am. The judge looks at him a half-second longer than necessary. The half-second reads like an apology the bench can't make out loud. In the FBI conference room next door, dry erase boards on every surface, a timeline pinned like a spine down the center. Tran briefs me on the witness who used to be a problem and now wants to be a solution. Mason Hale, she says. Communications consultant, prefers strategic storyteller. He's tendered a plea.
In exchange, he will explain the cocktail napkin math that led to your mountain hail is groomed to the edge of satire, tie that says modern, pocket square that says trying. He avoids my eyes and faces the jury like a man on stage. He explains, loosely, how access can be framed as narrative color without technically disclosing anything sensitive. A laugh tries to escape the defense table and gets smothered. Mr. Hale, the prosecutor says, did Mr. E.Wallace ever provide you with credentials to access a routing tool? Hale shakes his head fast enough to be seen from the back row. No, he didn't give me keys. He told me what doors existed and how they usually opened. He said he could get a cleaner story if a corridor looked better on paper. The phrase was his. And did anyone else hear that phrase? Hale glances down, guilt folding his mouth. At a rehearsal. A sponsor. I didn't know someone from a contractor had ears like a vacuum.
And what did you do with this cleaner story? The prosecutor asks. I wrote a brief with a hypothetical corridor, he swallows, except it wasn't hypothetical by the time it was forwarded. I didn't intend. Intention is not the element, the judge says, before anyone objects. The room settles, chastened. Back in court, the projector hums. The prosecutor keeps the chain intact with the patience of a person who likes knots. She remarks the exhibits, the overlay screenshot, the mirror log with the entry no one cleaned, the hash printout, the gateway log resolving to the Arlington liaison device group, the subkey prefix park ripped from the encryption packet and Tran later reproduced through a legal door. The defense rises to object at each turn and is told to sit at most. When the last exhibit number is decaled onto the record, the air feels full of serials. Now, the prosecutor says, the government will play a recording obtained by subpoena from Mr. Hale's device. The defense rises again. Foundation? The judge has already ruled on the motion in limine. The foundation is the forensic extraction report that says the voice memo is what it purports to be. The defense sits, preserving the point for appeal. The audio clicks. Ethan's voice fills the room without him in it. I feel my ribs arrange themselves. His tone is the one he uses on donors, intimate without intimacy. Medics don't take fire. They clean up. We need a cleaner route on paper. No theatrical music, no compression to make it pretty. Just a man rounding off other people so his story won't have corners. The courtroom doesn't breathe for a count of 5. The reporter's keys stutter and then race. The defense attorney looks down at his own shoes like he's trying to remember which feet he brought. The prosecutor doesn't smile. This isn't that kind of sport. Your Honor, she says, the government rests on the issue of motive. She doesn't have to say contempt for the profession out loud. The memo says it, and it says something about fame dressed as service. On cross, they try me once more. Sergeant Wallace, defense counsel purrs, you and your brother have history. Might your interpretation of this evidence be colored by
resentment? I picture our dining room window reflecting his badge like a second sun. I picture Locke's thigh under my hands, Vance counting with me until the numbers ran out. My interpretation is that time moves in one direction, I say. At 0850, a convoy left. At 0909, a corridor turned green. The mirror log shows a DSB liaison account right. The gateway logs place the right in Arlington. The packet we received on the mountain carries a subkey in the same range, and the memo you just heard uses the word cleaner with respect to a route. Those aren't colors, they're lines. They meet. He opens his mouth to deliver a line he's practiced in the mirror and then closes it around nothing. The judge thanks me, the way a judge thanks a witness who didn't take the bait. When Keene leaves the building, no one claps. 2 agents shake his hand and point him to a side door, away from cameras that haven't even bothered to set up because there's nothing sexy about timestamps. Tran brushes my sleeve with her knuckles as we pass in the hallway. It reads as human contact without indulgence. On the record, she says. That matters. By afternoon, the jury looks like they've been rolling the same marble in their cheeks for hours. The judge calls both counsel to the bench. Voices buzz into white noise. Then he leans back, eyes cutting the room to pieces. He thanks the jury for attention to detail, schedules closing arguments, and sets a date for the verdict. The gavel is as small as a knuckle and twice as final. Outside, the city pretends the courthouse is just another building. People walk fast, not because they're late, but because that's what this town does. The glass on the lobby door returns a quick, ghost version of me. My phone vibrates in my hand, a number that has a seal instead of a name. A woman's voice is crisp and kind enough to carry both things at once. White House personnel. East Room, Friday. Dress uniform. I say yes because there is no other word that fits in the space. I hang up and lift my eyes across the street. My parents stand on the far curb, both dressed like church without the music. My father's hands are jammed into his coat pockets. My mother holds her purse with both arms crossed, a barricade. They look at me and do not dare to come closer. The judge sets the date for the verdict. I leave the courtroom when the White House office calls. East Room, Friday. Dress uniform. Across the street, my parents looked at me and did not dare to come closer. The smell of fresh flowers in the East Room reminds me of the antiseptic smell of the medical tent. The MC reads my name. The commander-in-chief steps halfway down the steps. Applause rises and falls like surf against marble. The chandeliers throw coin-bright circles onto polished floors. Uniforms ripple in neat rows, and camera shutters whisper in bursts. I focus on the seam where carpet meets parquet. The way I used to focus on the seam of a wound. Find the edge. Make your hands smaller than the moment. A steward clears his throat. A staffer adjusts the mic. I keep my shoulders square and my breath measured, a count learned in a place that smelled nothing like flowers. They read the citation, dates, coordinates, verbs pulled tight. Conspicuous gallantry, hostile engagement. Words that land with ceremony because the room needs ceremony to keep from tipping. I hear my own name the way you hear it in a hospital corridor. Recognizable. Distant, busy doing a job. He comes toward me then, not all the way, just those few steps that are the difference between stage and ground. The heat in my face is the same heat I felt leaning over a chest seal while the world hissed sand. We shake. His hand is warmer than I expect. He takes a breath, looks down at the printed page, then away from it, and lifts his eyes to mine. The script loosens its teeth. You saved more lives than our statistics can count, and you saved one of mine. The words settle in the chest like a weight that makes posture easier, not harder. A rustle runs through the room, breath drawn in as a single organism. The podium light reflects in the glass of a portrait and throws a sliver of gold across his sleeve.
The ribbon is cool against my neck. Metal rests where pulse meets air, and the memory of rotor wash crosses my skin. My right hand goes up without conscious thought, and meets his in a salute that feels like a bridge over a gap I had learned to live beside. I hear my grandfather's frame click inside my pack the first time I carried it. I hear the quiet of a medical tent at 3 a.m. when the hardest part is staying awake with the living. A line from a dining room flickers and then burns out. He leans a fraction closer, the way you lean to be heard without telling the microphones you're doing it. I answer just loud enough for him to own the moment and me to let it go. Sir, that's enough. When protocol releases us, the room exhales. Hands, badges, ribbons, practiced smiles move toward me in a tide. The praise is professional and brief, the only kind I can hold without spilling. I catch sight of Ramos leaning against a column, braces on both knees, his cane hooked over his forearm like an afterthought. His grin is a line straight through the noise. We nod across the distance, an old language, still here. Torres stands beside him, scar peeking from a summer dress like a signature.
I want to walk over and trade bad jokes about hospital food. Instead, a camera turns and I pivot to give the lens its angle, like rotating a patient to spare a line from kinking. Across the last row of chairs, my parents stand stiff, as if posture could be apology. My mother's hand sits flat over her purse. My father's shoulders are the same ones that filled a tweed jacket over lecture halls. He looks like a man who has discovered that certainty can shatter and still not cut anyone else. I do not move toward them. We learned a choreography a long time ago. I am not here to improvise on it. Their eyes say more than any script we've ever read together. In a side room, a staffer hands me a water bottle and a folder with instructions I won't read until tomorrow. Reporters try to shape questions into shapes that fit a headline. I give them the version that belongs to public record and keep the rest where it belongs, in the bodies it came from. When they ask about the trial, I say, ongoing. When they ask about family, I say, complicated, because truth in one word is better than a paragraph that makes a stranger feel wise. Colonel Avery Shaw finds me by the window where light turns the glass into a clean mirror. She has the expression of someone who has carried both awards and stretchers. Sergeant Wallace, she says, I read your proposal twice. She taps the folder under her arm. Stress metrics, live decision forks, no noise failure drills. It's ugly. I like it. Ugly saves time, I say. Ugly saves people, she corrects, and sticks out a hand that feels like the edge of a blade properly cared for. Approved. We start a pilot at Fort Kingsley next week. I want you writing the scenarios and breaking them yourself. I reach into my pocket and find the challenge coin the recruits pressed into my palm after a simulator run months later that hasn't happened yet. Then realize time is folding for me, because that's what adrenaline does when it has no enemy left in the room. I roll a coin that actually exists, Morales' old team coin, across my knuckles and hear the small, solid clink against bone. Applause continues behind us like rain on a safe roof. I do not turn to collect more of it. I choose a job that repeats on purpose. The reception swells and thins. I watch people practice being comfortable with gratitude. Shaw briefs logistics. A protocol officer slips me a card with tomorrow's contacts. Trans text arrives with a number that will become a file when the verdict does. I slip outside for air that smells like old stone, boxwood, distant rain. The city carries a different kind of noise than the base. Sirens you don't have to duck. Laughter that doesn't test cover. A bus sighing at a red light. Ramos and Torres find me on the steps, their shadows long, their smiles longer. Drinks? Ramos asks. Only if it's not government soda, I say. We laugh, a clean sound that does not carry weight it can't hold. When we part, it's with the kind of wave you give a person you'll see again because you've decided to. Fort Kingsley is all echoing corridors and new paint, the kind that still smells like decision. The simulation bay hums when the lights come up.
Mannequins that bleed the right viscosity. Sound cues that rattle ribs. Heat lamps that mimic desert noon. Fans that mimic rotor wash. Projectors that can throw a bad night onto a wall and call it training. I run a hand along the edge of a portable wall and feel the nick in the plastic. Someone else's near mistake. Preserved. We map the drills on a whiteboard. Park draws arcs with a dry erase marker that squeaks. Morales circles decision points and writes, "Punish hesitation," in small, neat letters.
I add a column for truth checks, the places where someone can lie to themselves to survive the moment and then pay for it later. Shaw leans in. "You're not teaching medicine," she says. "You're teaching judgment." "Both," I say. But the second lets the first matter. We run the first scenario with volunteers. A trainee freezes on a tourniquet and tells me later he hates the sound of Velcro because it sounds like doubt. I sit on the floor beside him until his breath sets, then put the strap back in his hands. Again. His fingers tremble, then stop. We stand. He pulls until the limb drains white. A metric bumps from red to amber to green. I don't cheer. He doesn't need a parade. He needs the ability to do it again tomorrow. When the building empties, I walk the hall alone. The hum of unoccupied machinery feels like a held breath. In my office, a converted closet with good light, I set the metal in its case beside a photo of my team and slide the lid shut. The weight of it is the kind of weight that can hold papers down while windows are open. I pin the challenge coin beneath the photo and think of a boy in a chair counting his breaths with mine until he ran out of numbers. I take Vance's dog tag from the drawer and wrap the chain twice around my fingers. It catches the light the way a promise does. The sky outside has shifted from white to pearl to a blue that means edges are back. The flag at the entrance snaps once and stills. Somewhere down the corridor, a vending machine dumps a soda, and the aluminum sigh fades into silence. I pick up my notebook and write 2 sentences, then cross them out because they sound like a speech, and I am done with speeches. I leave the page blank and let it be a place where something harder than words can live. Night at Fort Kingsley. Security bells ring. A new boarder needs a rapid response training team. I squeeze Vance's dog tag. This time, they'll learn before bloodshed. As the East Room lights cooled on her metal, the room finally understood whose name would endure. The brother who branded her useless stood unmasked, his reroutes and backchannels crumbling under audited timestamps and an unblinking recording. His ascent was paper-thin. Hers was forged under fire. Betrayal prospers in silence until evidence finds its voice. The moment a villain feels safest is the moment the proof finishes sharpening its blade. When the salute fell and the murmurs died, the ledger was clear. Lives saved outweigh lies told. Truth may march slow, but when it arrives, it does not knock. It kicks the door off its hinges.